Good morning everyone and welcome to another TPN Credit Bureau System training. I am Rowan Terry, Legal Counsel here at TPN Credit Bureau, and I'm joined today by Chanel Kutsia, Account Manager.
Hi Rowan, good morning everyone. So
the training today is on how to do credit vetting for quality tenants. And I think a lot of the time, if your vetting processes are not done correctly, you end up with a huge amount of arrears on your books. Tenants are not paying their rent or their municipal accounts. You have to then go through the eviction process as well, and that's incredibly costly. The best way to manage your risk and your liability is to ensure that you have followed the best credit vetting process that you can. And so Chanel and I will be taking you through that today.
Yes, Rowan. So, TPN has got all of those tools available for you. Utilize them and make sure that you place quality tenants and don't sit with a delinquent tenant.
Absolutely. So just before we get started, guys, please make sure that if you have any questions you would like to address to us, please make sure that you put it into the live chat. I've got my laptop right here, so we will address any and all questions that come through. If we don't get to be able to address your query, please send it through to helpdesk@tpn.co.za and we'll be able to assist you after the webinar. Also, there will be a feedback form that will be posted in the live chat. Please make sure that you do complete it. Once you do complete it, we will be sending you a really beautiful flowchart that Chanel and I have worked on together that will summarize everything we have done today in this session. So please make sure you do that so you can get that really beautiful flowchart on the credit vetting process with TPN after our webinar. Chanel, do you want to take us away?
Yes, let's get into it. So the first step is obviously logging in or signing on our website. So you will go on to www.tpn.co.za. It will give you our TPN webpage, and here you will go and click on the login option at the top. You will then have to sign in with your username and password. And if you are a new user to the system, for the very first time that you do sign in on TPN, you will also receive a OTP which will be sent to you via SMS for verification purposes. Once you've entered all of that, you will then click on log in, and that will then take you through to your TPN profile. So although we won't be looking and going through the dashboard today, just to give you a bit of a background on what you will see and what you can expect here, the dashboard will basically provide you with your overview of your rental portfolio and how it's performing. And this is, of course, based on the data, your tenant payment behavior that you submit through to TPN. Today, however, we will be focusing on credit checks. So at the top, you will click on the credit checks tab. We will be looking at the consumer verifications or consumer checks on an individual as well as a business, but TPN also has other tools and functions available that you can make use of. So if we have a quick look here on the left-hand side, you have the ability to run deed searches. You can also go and generate a Know Your Client check, a KYC, which can be used for the purposes of verifying your buyers and sellers' identity, and then you also have the ability for agents specifically to go and run your pre-assessment checks prior to doing your viewings and taking those applicants out to the properties. Just do a quick verification of who they are, run the ID verification check, and the pre-assessment will also scan for any alerts. So if they do have any defaults or judgments, it will alert you of that as well. Today we are going to focus on the individual and business checks. So here you will go and click on Perform a new consumer credit check for your individual inquiry. Step 1, enter your consumer's details. So at the top, we have this inquiry reason that is highlighted here on the screen. So you as a rental agent that's now received the application, it's important you go and set the inquiry reason. The system, I do think, automatically filters it through to rental/setting limit for goods or services. And you can simply leave it on that because in terms of your application, it's going to be for a rental purpose. However, Rowan, from a credit bureau perspective, why is this inquiry reason important from our side?
So it is really important because in terms of Regulation 18 of the National Credit Act, this states that an inquiry reason must be provided when doing a credit check on a consumer. So this could either be for employment verification, for fraud purposes, and just as Chanel has explained, that if it's for rental, that will be the default that you do on the credit check. But please make sure that you do complete that inquiry reason for the correct purpose, and then you'll be able to continue.
Thanks.
Yes.
Just beneath the, just below the inquiry reason, you also have a reference field that you can make use of. Although the reference is not a mandatory field, it is there for, let's say you've got specific property references or a certain type of reference that you want to associate with the application that you're going to run at that point in time. You can then make use of that field to create your own reference there. Into the inquiry details. So here we can clearly see we need to complete all of these fields, starting with the applicant's ID number, their first name, the surname, the current address, meaning at that point in time when they are applying with you, where are they staying at that point in time, postal code, province, as well as the cell phone number.
So Chanel, I just wanted to ask a quick question there because TPN Legal get this query all the time, in that they are now renting to a foreigner, so they only have a passport.
Yes.
Would you be able to do a credit check on a foreigner?
You can, and it's a good question because we also do receive it a lot. It
Yes.
always comes up. You can definitely run your checks on foreigners as well. So on step one, where we can see this RSA ID number field, right to the right of that, you can see that there's a link to change it to a passport number search. If you do select that option, you will then be required to enter the passport number of that individual, as well as their date of birth and the nationality. So it's very important upon receiving the application and the details that you always ask for the copies of IDs and the copies of the passport document itself.
Yes, so that you can confirm it. Then also just to make sure that that passport is valid and it has not expired. Now, I know a lot of the times our Home Affairs is a very, very slow process, as we have all dealt with before. So if the passport has expired, however, that applicant has applied for the renewal of their passport, then just the proof from the Home Affairs that they have applied for their renewal will be sufficient.
So that they can still continue with the process.
Yes,
and not
otherwise, Shane, they're going to be sitting
delayed.
there for, it's going to be a long delay.
Yeah.
And then before we continue, sorry, we do have a question here that I just want to address quickly. It is from Rent a Roof Reps, and they say, if a credit check has been done, must all records need to be filed, even if the tenant is declined? Now, yes, you would need to do so for a period of 5 years in terms of the retention of records, in terms of the FICA Act. Now, it's very important also just to remember that if you do get asked at a later stage, if you did receive that consent, then you would be able to immediately submit it and keep it on file for a period of 5 years, where after 5 years you can then destroy that record. But even if the tenant is accepted or denied, please make sure you are keeping that written consent in file.
Very important
Yes.
there. We'll jump into that as well shortly. Okay, so then once you have completed all of the information on step one, just before we continue, I do want to highlight out the first name and surname fields. It's extremely important to enter this information directly off of the ID copy that you have received, because the system allows you to run an ID verification. So if the applicant has used a nickname or abbreviated name on the application form and you use that and you enter it here on the system, and let's say he's used his name as Fred, but at the Department of Home Affairs he's been registered as Frederick, you will then receive an ID verification warning to alert you the information that you've entered does not match up with what we receive back from Home Affairs. So always pay attention to the format, the spelling, and using the correct name and surname. When we click on next, it's going to take us through to step 2, confirm consent. At the top, we have this little credit score details section, which will allow you to basically generate additional information into your overall check that you will be selecting on step 3. The score version here at the top, we provide you with 3 different options. The basic credit score is going to generate the generate the probability of that applicant defaulting in future. The silver Credex option is then going to generate the affordability, where we look at what is their net monthly income versus the rental amount that they apply for. And your gold Credex option is going to give you all of the above, as well as give you a score based on what is the probability of them squatting in the property, so literally staying in the property without making any payment. You will then enter the net monthly income that they've provided you with, so by the collection of their bank statements and salary slips, the total installment, the rental amount that they are applying for. And a lot of times we also do receive the question, what happens if it's going to be two parties that will be signing the lease agreement and they are both going to pay the rental amount. The system allows you to then go and set the contributors for that application, so you can select one other person will help to pay the installment, and they literally just have to then provide you with the actual installment amount that they themselves will be paying for that rental property. Then having a look at your consumer verification. So you will note that we always automatically select this verify identity, and it's for a very good reason. There's a lot of fraudulent activity in the industry. So always make sure to run the ID verification. It runs a status check directly against the Department of Home Affairs, and it will also return back with a photo of what they should look like. You also have the ability to select verify biometrics, and this is going to be a selfie check. So if you do select this, your applicant will receive a SMS with a Curata link that they need to click on, and it will then prompt them to take a selfie, whereby the system will then match up the real-time selfie that they've taken versus the photo that's returned back from Home Affairs. Do they actually correspond? Is it the same person? Then this third tool here, verify income directly with bank. Rowan, I want to stop here just for a second. I believe we've got something very special on this.
Yes, indeed. So this is one of our ultimate fraud checks that we are able to provide to our clients, and we do have a quick little video for all of you guys just to watch in this respect. In today's online and accessible world, people are able to falsify bank statements, and identity theft is a very real problem. This is why TPN is proud to present verified online bank statements, where bank statements are requested directly from your client's bank and delivered to you on TPN secure platform. This check allows you to verify the applicant's actual income, verify the applicant's actual expenditure, prevent identity and documentation fraud, and provides convenience to applicants. Typically, you would request the applicant to provide supporting documentation, but TPN now provides a solution that allows you to do a full identity verification with the latest biometric technology. This enables you to request their bank statements directly from the source. Let's get back to reality. Michelle, how do you do this on the TPN system?
Rowan, it's as easy as ticking a box. Step 1, enter your consumer details. Step 2, verify income directly with bank. So once you have completed the process, the applicant will receive an SMS asking him or her to verify biometrics as well as consent to their bank details being shared.
Log on to TPN Credit Bureau to verify your applicants today. Another simple process that provides better data to make better decisions. So I don't know who that very handsome man was, but he had some very interesting things to say. So when it comes to bank statements, these are the most forged documents when it comes to credit vetting. And sometimes it can be very difficult to actually see how it's been forged and to be able to notice the little changes and pick up the amendments and the changes on there. So why not cut out the middleman and get it directly from the bank? This then completely takes away the risk of having to deal with fraudulent bank statements. And as well, it takes away and saves you a lot of time when you have to then go back and follow up with the applicant. Can I please have your bank statements? Can I please have your bank statements? With this, it's quick, it's easy, and it gets delivered straight to your computer. Then just before we continue, we do have a few questions, which we would like to just address quickly. From Colin van der Westhuizen, we have got, if the name has a hyphen or an apostrophe, why does the system not allow us to enter it?
Fantastic question. So on step 1, when you do enter the applicant's information, the system doesn't allow for special characters. So if you do have a hyphenated name, or sometimes you get a double barrel surname, rather don't include the hyphen or apostrophe, just leave it out, and then it will allow you to continue to the next step.
Fantastic, fantastic. Then we've also got from Estelle Cameron, in a case where the client just got married and the surname has not been changed yet at Home Affairs. I'm assuming in that one then you would just use the ID with the maiden name, yeah.
Fantastic. And even if in the case whereby, let's say you have used the new surname and it does give you an ID verification warning, then you'd simply know what the reason for that is. So it's not like a fraud alert or anything like that. You've got the proof that there was a change in the surname, hence the reason for the ID verification warning.
Fantastic. And then when it comes to turnaround time to receive the bank statements from the bank?
I do believe that it's quite quick, Rowan. Yeah. So it all depends on the time frame that your applicant, when you select this check on the system, your applicant will then receive a SMS notification. They do have to take their selfie, confirm their biometrics. They do have to release the bank statements from their side. And once those two key factors have been done, you will then receive, the user who selected this check on the system will then receive an email notification to confirm that the check was completed, and you can now log on to TPN to go and view the results of those statements that's been sent.
Fantastic. And this isn't a question, this is just from Hilda. I really love this feature of verification of bank accounts directly with the client's bank. We absolutely love it as well.
A real game changer.
It really is a game changer. It really helps with minimizing your risk and liability as an agent and a landlord as well.
Yes, definitely. Rowan, so getting back to the process on the system, just as with your verification of the bank statements, the system also allows you to go and verify the address that the applicant has supplied you with. In terms of making use of this tool, let's say the applicant is not the owner of the property, they don't own it, and verifying the address, what tools and actions can the agent or whoever's running the credit check also take in terms of verifying the address that they have supplied?
Perfect. So obviously if the person is an owner of a property, a municipal account will be able to be provided. However, that's not always the case. They would be able to provide proof of address by sending through the lease agreement of the current property that they're renting. That would be sufficient as well as an affidavit from, let's say, if they're staying with a family member or they're living with a family member, they would be able to provide an affidavit from a third party confirming that they reside at that property.
Yeah,
so
because I can make an affidavit to say that I reside at this address, but
it's not, that person is verifying their own address. You would need someone else to come and verify that if it is going to be an affidavit. Please also make sure that it is certified and commissioned by either police officer, just to confirm it's not just the
precautions have been taken.
Exactly, and it's not a letter that's just been signed. That's a very basic. But yes, lease agreements, municipal accounts, an affidavit,
statement of accounts,
or a rental invoice from the landlord, that will absolutely be able to provide you with the verification of their address and also make you compliant with FICA. FICA is very important. You need to confirm their proof of address in order to accept that application.
Perfect. Then getting into the legalities a bit. So the last tick box that you need to select on step 2 is this all-important NCA compliance declaration to confirm you have received your written consent. Rowan, what happens if they run an inquiry but they haven't obtained consent and a dispute gets logged?
Yeah. So what happens there is that if written consent has not been obtained before you perform the credit check, this will be a breach of the National Credit Act as well as the POPI Act as well, which means that person will be able to go to the National Credit Regulator to lodge a complaint in respect of the National Credit Act, as well as go to the Information Regulator in terms of the breach, the POPI breach. And then the regulators will be able to sit back and then give any kind of sanction. And also, if there has been any monetary damage suffered by that person, you would be liable for that. So it's so important to be able to get that written consent before you perform your credit check. Our residential and commercial and sales packs, commercial and residential lease packs and our sales pack do have all of those relevant consents within the rental applications as well as the lease agreements and any applications in the sales pack too. So just to make sure it's all there, go and see our shop and download our packs to be able to get that written consent.
Correctly, yeah. And just touching base on what we discussed earlier, if you do perhaps decline any applications, like Rowan said, keep those documents as well for 5 years, because the same thing can happen.
Exactly.
That applicant that you've declined can at any point in time log a dispute, and then you'd still have to be able to provide the...
It actually happened quite recently where I was dealing with an agent who had, because the applicant had been declined, they had destroyed all those documentation. And then we had to submit the consent dispute, which she wasn't able to confirm that they had that written consent. So it's very, very important that you do keep it. However, we've got the chat is going crazy, so we do have a few questions here. Vickers says here, why do we care about the current address if we are vetting them to move into our residential property? So Vickers, I'll take that one. In terms of FICA, you need to confirm their current proof of address, which means obviously I do understand they're moving into your property, but you would need to confirm where they currently are at the time of application. Then it says here, who calculates the income if self-employed or multiple incomes? That would be able just to be submitted by the applicant, and then you'll be able just to confirm via their bank statements.
Because you'd still ask them for their pay slips, the bank statements, so you can kind of also get that information off of those documents.
Exactly.
To use on the system.
Then Lizzie Deirdre says, would you still pay the fee if the applicant does not verify his identity? So that, I'm assuming, would mean, would you still pay the credit check fee from TPN even if his identity is not verified? And yes, you would still need to pay the fee for the credit check. Louis says here, when you omit a special character, must you use a space instead or just omit it altogether? So
just a space,
Okay.
Just a space,
Great stuff. And then we've got, on the basic credit check, do all these other added selections affect the TPN fees that the company has to pay?
So when you select the basic Credex portion, there's no additional charge, if I can call it that, just to generate the probability of them defaulting. So each and every point that you do go and select on the system, you will always see that it displays the cost for that specific module that you want to run. So you can kind of always verify what you will be paying versus what you are selecting from the system.
Then we've also just had from Kaz Realtors here, had a few biometric selfie processes that came back as an error because the session expired. How does one handle that?
If it expires, I think the link itself is active for 72 hours. So if the session or the link expires, you can just reach out to our support department so that they can help you to reset that link and then just send a new one to the applicant so that they can look out for it and then just complete it as quickly as possible from there.
Fantastic. Then I just want to confirm here with Lauren Swift. Lauren says the TPN application does not mention anything about the applicant's information being given regarding the POPI Act. Do you provide another form for this as information is shared with the owner of the unit? So Lauren, if you do go back to the last page of the application form, just above the signatory, they will confirm there that you are, the applicant is agreeing for you to obtain any and all information from any credit provider, including a registered credit bureau, with regards to their payment profile, their indebtedness, their whereabouts, etc. So it is included on the last page of the application form. And then I think we can continue.
Great. Thank you for all of the lovely questions. Okay, so once you have confirmed that you have received your consent in written format, you will then click on Next to proceed to step 3 of your report selection. So I want to highlight out here your TPN RentCheck inquiry. It is the most comprehensive credit report for the reasons being your RentCheck provides you with a combined profile of what we as TPN collect in terms of rental data, levy data, as well as school fee data. And it will also then include the SACRA data, which is profiled on the TransUnion database. And the SACRA data is simply referring to the different types of credit agreements that the applicant has and whether or not they're paying those accounts on a monthly basis. So accounts such as credit cards, personal loans, clothing accounts, so that you can make use of that information again for in support of affordability in that respect. If, however, you do get to this step and you do not see that you have the RentCheck option available on your screen, it means that you are not currently submitting your tenant payment behavior. So the TPN RentCheck inquiry is based on reciprocity of data. If you don't see this and you would like to know how you can submit your data to TPN, please reach out to our data department and they'll gladly assist you to get your payment behavior onto the system for you to gain access to this report.
Chanel, sorry, we've got so many questions happening in the chat here and I do just want to get through a few of them. From Michelle, we've got, is it possible to run a credit check on an entity that is a trust? So on the trust itself, you would not be able to. However, you can get the consent, and it is recommended to do so, on all of the separate trustees of that trust. So you would just have each trustee complete an application form.
Run it on the individual itself.
Exactly, just to complete and have that on the individual person there. Then we've also got here, why is it that non-South Africans have no credit records?
So, and that is something that happens a lot.
Yes.
Obviously, the information on your reports is based on South African-based information. So any consumer that has accounts or rental accounts or school fee accounts within South Africa, that is the type of information that you'll be able to get on the report. If they come from another country and they literally don't have any cell phone accounts or clothing accounts at that stage, then there won't be any information to display in terms of payment behavior.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Then we've also got here, we have a question which says, please, does a signed rental application form serve as written consent? So just to make sure, if you're not using the TPN application form, please make sure that your application form does include a clause that says they are consenting to you performing a credit check. However, to save you time, download the residential lease pack, commercial lease pack, sales lease pack, and all of our application forms. That consent is already in there, as well as our lease agreements. Then just quickly, why is it that when you purchase a property, they assess your gross salary? But with TPN, they evaluate affordability based on your net salary. This sometimes makes it challenging to secure approval. And I think just based on that, with your gross salary, you're not receiving that full amount.
No.
So then why would you then decide to use that salary amount?
It's a risk.
It's a risk.
It's a risk.
Because they wouldn't be receiving that full salary. So use the net salary, and then obviously you would look at the debt obligations within the credit check.
Yes.
Great, Chanel. I think we can move on to the next step.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, on step 3, you will ensure that if you do see the rent check, you'll always just leave it on that option. You won't select or tick any of these boxes below. All of them have already been included within your rent check, as well as the additional SACRA data. If you have selected to retrieve the verified online bank statements on the previous step, you'll see that it automatically then gets ticked here for you on step 3. So when we now scroll down and click on perform credit check, you'll then be given a 4th step where you need to enter the banking information for that particular applicant so that you may request those bank statements. Once you've entered it, you will click on finish, and that will then generate your credit check result. So on here at the top, you'll have your consumer's information, which we can see displayed there. And below that, we have the all-important ID verification. So on this result, we can see that Fred is married, he is male, his identity does exist on the Home Affairs Department, the National Identification System. He does form part of the National Populations Register, and Fred also completed his selfie when he received the SMS notification for the bank statements, and overall he's received a pass on his identity status.
So Chanel, we get this query a lot in legal as well, is that what happens if the ID verification does not come back as a pass? So for instance, Hannes has returned as a fail.
Yes.
What does that mean? What can the agents or landlords do in that respect?
So there's a few possibilities. If, for example, the Hannes little indicator for Hannes has returned with a red cross, and most of the times when that happens, you will note that there's also not a photo then that's returned, and that can then be an indication of Home Affairs not having the biometrics on file for Fred. Simply referring to Fred has still the old green coded barcoded ID. He doesn't have a smart card, where literally if you go and apply for a smart card or have any updates done on your passport, Home Affairs literally then takes a photo of you to keep it on their records. If you ever see a status that returns as ID blocked, which will normally be on the far right hand side there, in those cases I will rather refer or recommend that you have a discussion with the applicant. They need to go to the Department of Home Affairs to query why there's been a blocked status associated with their identity.
Yes.
Perhaps something is going on, so rather have them go and confirm it. And I do think that they get like some sort of a certificate or clearance certificate to say that they have been there, everything is in order, perhaps something needed to be updated at Home Affairs, and then at least you can continue from there.
Just quickly on this, Belinda Hickson has asked the question and said, if a client completes a rental application and uses an electronic signature, I often ask them to send a cover mail confirming that they give permission to run the credit check. Is this adequate? So Belinda, if there is no consent clause within your application form, an email will not suffice. It needs to be written consent, meaning a signature needs to be signed on the actual form where they are giving consent. And that can be an electronic signature as well.
Where it's got their name, surname, ID number, because when we send that off, when a dispute gets logged, they can't just base it on this is my signature, but there's nothing associating my signature with Chanel Kutsia.
Exactly. But an email for them to come back and say, yes, you can do a credit check on me, even though they are consenting in the email, it needs to be written consent. So that signature is the most important thing to get.
Great. Then following the ID verification, we do also have the Know Your Client check, which is this section here that's returned with your KYC result. So earlier on, when we were talking about the verification of the addresses that you receive with your new applications, if it happens that you've run that check and the address here does not match up because they don't own the property, that would be the reason for this score being affected. So like Rowan stated earlier, you can ask for the copy of the lease agreement or rental statement, invoices, just to confirm the address where they were currently staying at that point in time. Right, then getting into the interesting bits, we have the TPN RentCheck scorecard. So on this RentCheck scorecard, we can clearly see a lot of red, which will always be an alert because this applicant has got accounts that is clearly not being paid. We have these three little report indicators here in the middle. So the first indicator is going to refer to the good standing percentage for accounts that is profiled on the TPN Credit Bureau database. So accounts in respect of how do they pay their rent, levies or school fees. The middle indicator is going to provide you with the good standing percentage of accounts profiled on TransUnion, those different types of credit agreements. And then we also have a third indicator to highlight out any negatives in the form of any defaults or judgments that's been profiled on either TPN or TransUnion. Today, however, I do want to pause and have a look at the score breakdown. So in terms of the affordability, using that net monthly income versus the salary that they apply for is extremely important. On this result, we can see the applicant earns a net income of 60,000 and they've applied for a property of 17,800. It kind of makes you wonder why the system is, or why the report is reflecting it as being highly unlikely for them to be able to afford it. And the reason for that is because the Credex calculator there also takes into consideration the other monthly obligations that they've got in respect of those accounts profiled on TransUnion. In this instance, we can clearly see their monthly installments for accounts on TransUnion is 108,000 Rand on a net income of 60,000. It's motivation enough to clearly see and have the conversation with the landlord to say they literally cannot afford your property.
Yeah. And I think it's very important that when you do get the credit check, just because you've got the credit check does not mean that it's now great, fantastic, this is all accepted. You need to go through it, understand exactly what the debt obligations are. We get this query in legal all the time to say, look, I don't understand why they can't afford this, their salary is great. And before I can even look at the document, I can see at the top to say, hold on, their debt obligations are outweighing completely what they are be able to pay for the rental. So it's very important to make sure that you are just interpreting the credit check specifically. We've got a question here. Sorry, Anna asks, could you just remind everyone what NPR stands for again?
The National Populations Register.
Fantastic. And then we've got the landlord from Rage Realty. Landlord insists that the credit check be shared with him. Do we need consent for the prospective tenant?
Good question.
This happens all the time. And a lot of the time, agents refuse to provide landlords with the credit check. That is completely wrong. The landlord needs to be able to see the credit check and assess it himself to approve the tenant. So he needs to see the credit check, and you don't need to get further consent from the tenant, because our consent clauses provides there that this information can be provided to the property practitioner as well as the landlord. And
also, ultimately, those two parties are going to be dealing with one another. I need to be able to understand this person with this credit result, are they going to be able to afford my property?
Exactly.
So, like Ryan said, having a look at this RentCheck scorecard is great. It obviously highlights out all of the alerts, but we always recommend to, if I can call it, dissect the report a little bit, go and have a look at what these accounts are specifically for. Included within your RentCheck at the top, you'll have your different tabs. So if we have a look at the TPN report, that will provide you with all of the consumer information that has returned from the data that we collect. And if that applicant happens to be a member or director of a company, you'll also get the SIPC data to confirm that on the report as well. Scrolling down, we then get into any current or previous accounts in respect of rentals, levies or school fees, and what the payment behaviors for those accounts were, the inception date. You can also then clearly go and view the rental amount. Again, from an affordability perspective, if you can see that Fred was in this property for 10,400 and for those 4 months he did not make a payment. Now he's applying for a property of 17,000. It's a red flag.
It's definitely a red flag. You're able to also just kind of understand the payment patterns of a tenant and how they pay their rental. So obviously on there you'll have POT, which is paid on time. That means that the tenant has paid their rental on or before the 1st of the month. That is in green because that is exactly what you want all the time. Then you also have got a paid late. That means that the full amount has been paid, but not on the 1st, any time after that and before the end of the month. A partially paid, which is a PP, and the purple, that is going to be able to explain that at least a certain amount of the invoice for that month has remained unpaid. And then obviously did not pay means that no money was received within that particular month. Then also we do have a grace period, which is quite an important one as well to discuss here. Tenants often come back when they do look at this information and they say, well, I'm entitled to a grace period, a 7-day grace period. Just to confirm, there is nothing in our legislation or law that states that a tenant is entitled to a 7-day grace period. However, it is the landlord's discretion to decide whether he does want to give a grace period to the tenant for that month.
Maybe something happened, it's a good paying tenant, something happened, he maybe asked to pay a few days later.
Yes.
The landlord accepted the arrangement and
then you would be able to provide a grace period on there. But just to remember, when tenants come back to you and say, I'm entitled to this, please, you can actually ask them where in the law that states it, because it does not exist. There is no such thing as a legislated grace period.
Right, so that is the information on TPN. Then quickly having a look at the TransUnion tab. So TransUnion collecting all of the, also it contains the consumer's basic consumer information, addresses, contact numbers, aka information. And then as we go down, if there are any defaults or judgments, it will be displayed like this. So you can literally go and see when the judgment was granted, the amount, what it was for. And Rowan, again, this is something that also comes up quite often. What is the difference between a default listing and a judgment listing, and how long do they stay against my record for?
So that is a great question, because we do get it quite often. A default would be regarded as an adverse listing, or the more colloquial term would be a blacklisting. We do have on our blog the guide to adverse listings, which does give you the requirements and legalities around loading a blacklisting or an adverse listing onto a tenant. You would need to have sent a 20 business day letter of demand. Yes. That includes a particular clause that warns them of the effect on their credit record if the amount is not paid.
For intention.
Exactly, for their attention. And our TPN letter of demand that you can access through our system if you are a TPN subscriber includes that clause in there already, so there's no need to worry about having to do any extra work. And then once the tenant is in arrears for that amount for 3 billing cycles, so 3 months, then you would be able to load them onto the TPN system as a default or a listing. However, a judgment is completely separate. That is where you have had to institute a summons or a legal action, and you have gone through the entire court process to get a court order or a judgment for a certain amount of money, and that information can also be loaded on TransUnion with all the details, as Chanel has explained earlier. So it is very, very different. With the blacklisting or adverse listing, you don't have to proceed with any legal action there. There are obviously the separate processes. Please just check our blog post on that in that regard. It's blog.tpn.co.za. And then for a judgment, you will need to go to an attorney's firm to issue your summons. Or if you're proceeding out of the small claims court, you'll be doing all of that yourself.
Thanks. If we continue to have a look at the rest of the details that returned on TransUnion, it will now give us the actual breakdown for what these monthly accounts are for that high 108,000 Rand installment. So this is the SACRA data that I was referring to earlier on, and we can clearly then see it returns back with, here we've got a Markham's clothing account. We can see the date that it was opened. We can see the monthly installment for that one specific account, and you can also then confirm the actual overdue amount for that one particular account or for all of the accounts combined. So this information is crucial to have access to because, again, coming back to your affordability, you want to have as much information as possible to make a more informative decision on whether or not to place that applicant.
Sorry, just while we are on this, I've got another question here, is which parts of this rent check report may be shared with the landlord, as they sometimes want to see proof that the proposed tenant is in good standing. The entire report must be sent to the landlord, so they can obviously make their own informed decision when dealing with the applicants for their property.
Correct,
Sorry,
yes. The one clear difference that you will see on the TransUnion accounts that appears versus the TPN accounts that we just had a look at. So we will use a POT for paid on time, PL for paid late. TransUnion uses numbers. And the number will simply indicate the amount of months which the account is in arrears for. So anything going up to 4, 5, 6 months in arrears. So ideally you'd like to see your zeros, everything's paid in full and on time. And in some instances there is a different key code, like we can see on this example, there's a letter L. The L, if you have a look at, there's like a small little link, view all key descriptions, which you will have to access once you've conducted the check online. If you click on it, it will take you through to a wiki page where you can then specifically go and view what that letter was provided for. Right, so that's the SACRA data on TransUnion. Your verified online bank statements, the verified income. If we have a look at the tab that's then returned there, and this will obviously be once you've received verification of the check being completed, you will then have this bank statement analysis, which will provide you with the overview of the income and expenditure for the past 6 months. You can view the current balance as it was at that point in time that the bank statements were requested, the average income earned over the past 6 months, and typically on what date do they receive their salary. Below the graph, you have then these downloadable links where you can go and click on the link to retrieve the actual full bank statement, which is what we had a look at earlier as well on that advert that was played.
Perfect. So Chanel, we have now looked at the process of credit vetting individuals, but how would we use the TPN system to credit vet juristic entities?
Yes. So going back to our credit checks tab, once you've clicked on that, you will see that the second line there is perform a new business credit check. So exactly the same as your step one when you ran a check on the individual, except this is now where you're going to have to enter the business's registration number, which must be in that specific format. If you do not have a business registration number, you can then go and search on the business name to see if it is going to bring up that company information. If not, you won't be able to continue if you don't have the specific details required for your business credit check. At the bottom, again, we've got the NCA compliance, so you have to confirm that for the juristic check as well, you have received your consent for you to be able to go and run the check on the business. When we click on next, it will take you through directly to step 3, the report selection. Again, the same as with your individual, you want to see that you've got access to the rent check inquiry. Included within the business rent check is, however, a lot more detailed reports and little bits of components, because it's such a bigger entity and the risk is so much greater as well. So you'll never have to tick any of these boxes at the bottom if you do have access to rent check. Again, if you don't, reach out to our data department. So you'll leave it on rent check and click on perform credit check. This will then bring us to the credit check result for the business. So at the top, we have the company information here. And Rowan, just having a look at this, what is the one important thing that you can clearly pick up on there?
So the most important thing would be your business status, which would be the current status of the business. If that is showing up as they are in ARD registration process, that means that they haven't been submitting their annual returns to the CIPC. So they're not being compliant and they're in the process of being deregistered. Also be aware if it says that they are in business rescue or liquidation as well. That's very important. They would not be able to contract with other entities and rent properties. So it's very important to see there and to say, if it is in business, then fantastic. If it's anything else, be very concerned, and then just be able to do and discuss with the entity itself as to what exactly is going on their side.
Yes. So if we go down further on the business credit check, you also again have a business rent check scorecard. However, here we can see that there's a little bit of extra information that's also been provided with the CIPC scorecard. So the CIPC scorecard is going to confirm the number of directors associated with that entity, the entity age, in what is it, in a mature stage? Is it perhaps a startup if it was only recently registered and started with operations? Entity status, which is what we just talked about. If it's in business, it will give a pass. If it is an ARD registration, it will give a fail or a warning indicator there. Then also director maturity, the maturity stage or age of the directors associated with the company. If there are any, let's say for example, the entity status has returned as a fail, that will directly affect the CIPC score here. It won't return back as a good. It will be most likely, if it's a fail, it's going to be poor because the status of the business is not in business at that point in time.
Yes.
Then again, you have your report indicators for the business as well, with your overall business Credex that's returned. And what's nice about having access to the business rent check is that the rent check doesn't only provide you with information that's returned and associated with the business, but also on the directors in their personal capacity, which is important because if they are going to sign surety, what happens if you are not aware that they've got default judgments or other rental accounts that they're not busy paying?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to deciding if you're going to be entering into a lease agreement with a juristic entity, to provide additional security, you would ask for a deed of suretyship from one of the directors. However, with this check, you're able to then look and see what those directors are doing. So if the deed of surety is going to be a complete waste of time because he has no assets, he's got all these debts, there'll be nothing that you'll be able to collect from the surety in the event that the company goes under or goes into arrears for whatever reason. So it's very, very important to check that information. And then obviously our deed of suretyship is included in our commercial and residential lease packs as well.
Yes. So on this result, we can see that below the report indicator and the three circles that's returned there, it highlights out to you in red defaults and judgments and principal defaults, which we can see in this case, there is a number 1 associated under TransUnion. So again, delving into those tabs within your business rent check, the TPN tab is going to reflect again, all of the company's information, the directors associated with the company, and then you get the breakdown of all of the rental accounts associated with that business at that point in time. So again, in terms of affordability perspective, you can get an idea of what the rental amount was for that specific was or is, if they still have the existing accounts, and then obviously their payment behavior in respect of those accounts. Having a look at the TPN deeds, that will then reflect the any deeds associated not just with the company, but also with the directors in their personal capacity, properties that they own, and then having a look at your director defaults, which is what highlights out which of your directors in their personal capacity has got any default information on TPN in respect of rental, levy or school fee accounts that they've got, the payment behaviors of those accounts, and we also have the principal default that will then confirm again which of the directors have any associated blacklistings or default listing or judgments that has been profiled against their records.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chanel. So that brings us to the last 5 minutes of our training, and we have got plenty of questions from all of you. So we will try and get through as many as we can before the end of the webinar. But just like we said at the beginning, if we don't address your webinar, please email helpdesk@tpn.co.za. So we've got a question here from Ravashni who says, the directors or trustees refuse for an individual RTC inquiry. Are they legally compelled? So when it comes to a trust, if you aren't able to perform the credit check, like we said earlier, on the trust, and the trustees are refusing, then I definitely would not suggest continuing with that transaction. It would be quite a concern in that respect. We've got Rafaro Realty who's asking, a tenant comes back as an A, but all of their debt is short-term loans, which they pay on time. Would this be a risky tenant?
I would regard it as a bit of a risk because if you need to make small loans every month, clearly there is a bit of a financial difficulty that you're not able to get through the month, and you need to get a bit of finances from another place. So I would definitely take that into consideration.
So that's exactly why we have the check where it says, can they afford it? Because then what you would do is, if they are still paying their debts on time, you need to look at the total amount of debts compared to the rental amount they'll have to pay, as well as their net salary. And that's how you would be able to manage their risks, your risk in that respect. Then we've got one here. Is the deregistration status grounds for declining the application? Yes, that definitely would be a reason for...
something's happening there, something is
wrong, and something is a bit concerning. And like we said earlier, it's not, and in terms of FICA as well, there's no more a tick box approach to say, yes, we've got the credit check, tick, that's it, we can accept this particular tenant. You need to go through it and understand exactly what's going on. And if there is a red flag, such as the business status is not correct, or there's something that's showing up on their report that's not making a lot of sense, and it's giving you a bit of a red flag, go back to that applicant and ask them for clarification, ask them for verification as to what is going on. And then just to be able to properly assess your risk and liability.
Also, if it happens to be those annual fees that they haven't paid to Sub C, it's a risk for you, because what happens if they don't pay their rental installment for that month? So it remains a risk. You want to have more information around what that status is all about.
So Hendrine Hodson says, please give more information regarding degree qualification check.
Okay, so within your within the rent check, there is a qualifications check there as well. That if I quickly go back to the results, let's just have a look here. There is a tab there, qualification. This qualification will forms part overall as your within your rent check. So the information on this qualifications check that return is from PERC. The only two institutions that's not included with this result is from WITS and UCT. Any other qualifications that has been associated with that individual will then be displayed on that report section.
Fantastic. We've got here from Busisiwe, what does it mean when a potential applicant has an E for a scorecard and then they have one inquiry? Does this mean that they are not a good payer?
So we'll have to actually maybe look at the actual result, because Within your Credex score that returns, so the A, B, C, E, there's a lot of components that gets taken in there. It's all of the information that we collect, the payment information that TransUnion collects, and then as well as the affordability calculator. So based on all three of those components as a whole, it then gives you the score. So if you'd like, we can have a chat after that or on that afterwards offline. You're more than welcome to reach out to us, share the results, and we'll go through that with you.
Perfect. And then we just have time for one more question from Candace Waller, who says, do the occupants need to be featured as well, even if the person paying the rent is noted as the tenant whom has been featured? You would not need to feature the occupants. You only need to feature the person who is actually signing the lease agreement as a tenant. Guys, that brings us to the end of this training session this time. Thank you so much. The questions have been, they are still coming through.
And it's amazing questions. It's really good questions. It's important questions. Remember to look out for that feedback link so that you can get your flowchart on what we've gone through today.
Exactly. And then also just any questions we haven't been able to address, please make sure that you have sent them through to helpdesk@tpn.co.za. And then also please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do these types of trainings all the time. So subscribe so that you'll be able to get a notification the next time we are doing a webinar like this, whether it's on systems training or legal training or any industry talks that we have. Please make sure you subscribe, and thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Bye.